Our guest at this time is Rachel Mars. Rachel currently serves as the lead academic advisor for the healthcare management program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where she oversees a caseload of approximately 300 students on campus and online major students. She's also the program administrator for their online student center and faculty advisor for the HCM Student Association. Rachel is the incoming president-elect for the UAB Council of Academic Advisors and is an active member of the Professional Development Committee for the council. Prior to the pandemic beginning, Rachel was a huge advocate for using flipped advising and Zoom as tools to reach her online population of students and served as a Zoom mentor for those advisors who had to pivot their approach to virtual advising. Prior to coming to UAB in August 2018, Rachel worked at Stanford University, where she originated the role of academic advisor at the Brock School of Business and advised freshmen and sophomore pre-business majors and all business minors, as well as served as orientation and undergraduate recruitment coordinator for the school. Rachel has been an active member of NACADA since 2015. Personally, Rachel is a super fan of the TV show Friends, loves coffee, and loves spending time with her husband Daniel and their two dogs, Noah and Lulu, in their townhouse on the hill. Rachel runs an ever-growing fan account about Aldi USA on Instagram called Aldi Foodie. Finally, Rachel was recently accepted into the graduate certificate in leadership and development starting this fall, and then will go on to pursue a doctorate program in higher education while also hoping to grow her family through domestic adoption. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I sound really busy, don't I?
just a smidge.
Just a smidge.
I understand why you need and like all that coffee, though I think many of our listeners working in higher ed can empathize with that. And we will delve into many of the things that Matt outlined in your bio. But we always like to begin to give listeners the opportunity to get to know you a little bit, Rachel. Can you talk to us about like how you came to work in higher ed and ended up where you are now?
Absolutely. So I went to Auburn University. That was my undergrad, not part of the bio. I should have put that there. While I was there, I was a resident assistant. So I'm a first generation student. I didn't know anything about college until I got to college. I was the student that was literally downloading, looking at all of the PDFs because that was the huge thing. We didn't have apps when I went to Auburn, trying to figure out my routes and where I was going to live. And so I was a resident assistant for 3 years after my freshman year in the same building. And so my senior year, I actually went to a graduate school fair. And that's why I realized you could actually make a career out of working in higher education. And so I literally applied for 2 graduate programs. I'm very put all my eggs in one basket. I really shouldn't do that. But I applied for 2 graduate programs, one at Auburn and one at South Alabama. And at South Alabama, they had this thing called a community director graduate assistantship. And so I was able to get my graduate school for free. Yay. And then that's kind of how my career in higher education started, because it was a graduate professional working, you're working in the residence hall, and each of us had our own leads. And so I was the lead for our residence hall association, as well as our training and development for our students and stuff. And then I was really blessed to be able to live in the newest residence halls on campus, which came with its own its own challenges and stuff like that. So it was challenging for sure. But it was really fun because I also got to really work with students and supervise students. And that was a lot of growth opportunities and stuff with that, because no one really taught me how to be a supervisor. I just kind of had to learn it as I went. And the first year, I really flubbed it up. But the second year, I was much better because I took what I had learned. And it seems every year I worked in housing, because I even went after my graduate school was complete. I actually worked at where I am now, UAB, as a residence life coordinator. And so I was there in housing for about 7 years, if you count my undergraduate work. And then I came to advising after, when I was looking for a functional area to move to outside of student affairs, because I was kind of very burnt out on the whole living on campus thing. So I was like, I want a job that doesn't require me to do that. So, and then I found the role at Stanford. And so I was at UAB for 1 year, and I felt bad at first, but then it kind of became apparent that that's pretty common in higher education. You learn different areas that you do and don't want to be in. And so I moved into where I was at Stanford, and that was a lot of fun. It was really interesting being the first true advisor on the campus, because you really got to kind of make the role your own, which was a lot of fun. But there's also still the campus politics that you have to negotiate and figuring out, like, I can say this, I can't say that. And so, and I was there for about 3 years and 3 months, and then I moved to my current role. So a lot of fun. I really loved, the reason why I wanted to be in higher education was I love the development that happens because I saw it in myself, like from freshman to senior year. And I was the RA for freshman students really my whole time there, and so it was a lot of fun. The last 2 years were even more interesting because I was actually an RA for a boys floor, being a female, and so it was interesting because I kind of got looked at like they're either their mother, their big sister, or somebody they tried to flirt with, and it was weird. And so try not to instigate that last one. But my last year I was there, they had honors students in my floor, and so you would think they would be a little more well behaved than the traditional student. No, there's still some very interesting. I remember my last day or my last week in the hall that they were kind of like, we can't get in trouble. It's the last week, and they were right. You can't really get in trouble your last week, and so they did a lot of pranks and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. Not fun being, I was actually like barricaded into my room by water cups. Like, I don't know if you've seen when people do that. So I opened my door and there was just like water cups everywhere I could possibly, view it, which is a lot of fun, but just definitely interesting. And so, but I take a lot of what I learned working in housing for those 7 years from undergrad to grad to professional, and just kind of, I will say housing and residence life individuals have the best stories. And I feel like that even goes into like working and advising, because, we each of us have really unique students that we work with. And so learning that respect and that care for students there in that functional area was super important to moving forward. And then it also gave me the perspective of if a student asked me a housing question or a residence life question, I can be like, well, actually go talk to this person. So I'm really grateful that I got that, because I feel like so many pieces touch each other just like they do in advising within residence life. So yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, and we've had previous guests who worked in housing residential life who have said it was a great experience. They were able to pick up so much and tie that into academic advising, but at the same time they're kind of glad they're out of housing.
Yes,
just because of how on the go it is.
Exactly. I don't think there were days when especially when I was at UAB, because at UAB I managed a building that was 11 stories and they all had balconies and they were all freshmen, and so there were great decisions that were made during that experience by some students, and not so great ones. And I remember, so it was when Snapchat was kind of becoming a big thing. And I still remember this student, one of my RAs brought to me a video from Snapchat of this student literally climbing from balcony to balcony. And he was like a good 8 floors up. And like, it's just pavement down there, so it's not like it would be soft if he fell. And so we had a really great educational conversation about that. And then I just to give you another story for funsies, I lived in the building. So in the building, I lived at the top floor and to the left, and so I had a really great view of what is our Vulcan statue, which is kind of like a landmark in Birmingham. But because I lived in the building, I often saw things that were not great. And so one night, a student who was actually the brother of one of my RAs in the building, he decided it would be a great idea to throw things off the balcony like chairs, eggs. And I had to call the RA on call, and I was like, hey, I'm just out here on my balcony and I see things going on. Can you go handle that? It was very interesting. So a lot of educational conversations, a lot of conflict management too. Like, that's another interesting thing. And then I think another piece that I think housing really gives you is the parent aspect. I don't really see as many parents right now in my current role, but when I was working in housing, it was, navigating those relationships can sometimes be challenging. And also you hear a lot of angry sometimes. So like dealing with those challenges are really interesting for sure. But yes, I agree. I'm grateful to be out of it. I will value my time forever, but I'm glad that's not where I am now. I really love advising. So yeah.
Yeah, res life is never ever dull, and as you said, you have transitioned out and moved away from that side of things. But maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your current role and the different hats that you wear within that.
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, I'm at UAB in the healthcare management program currently, and I I've really gotten a lot of autonomy in my role. So I've kind of gotten to even, we had an advisor before I came in. And so I kind of came in as this primary advisor role where I was seeing everyone from freshmen to really first semester seniors. And so having that autonomy, and then we just actually are moving to a more traditional structure where we're splitting it down the middle between last names and stuff. And so I've gotten to actually, I just got done going through I'm still going through it really, the training piece for our new advisor. So that's been a really interesting experience. But what I was going to say is that, yeah, I've one of the things that I really loved about this role is I've gotten to really engage an online population of students, because we have a fully online major and a fully on campus or a hybrid of the two, even before the pandemic began. Because originally our program began as a degree completion. So people that were working in healthcare as nurses, physical therapy assistants, those kind of things, they could come and get a bachelor's degree, because most of those will have like a associate's licensure type of thing program. And so we really moved from that to having more traditional students who are freshmen that are actively choosing our program. And then on top of just the traditional, like, this is your major and this is what you do, we also have fast tracks. So we have students who are going from a fast track in healthcare management to the health informatics master's program, so working with technology and stuff. And then we have students who are interested in occupational therapy, who are doing a fast track, currently not active, but working on it. And so that's a whole like gamut, is keeping up with that coursework and then saying, you have to do it this way. And so on top of that, the flipped advising piece is really something I've come into my own. We had this online student center when I came in, but it wasn't being utilized quite as effectively as it is now. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's just I really leaned into that communication piece, because what I was finding in my appointments is that students were saying, I don't know this. And I'm like, you have this online resource. Why don't you go to it? And so it's basically an online course that they're automatically enrolled into every semester, but we use it as a interactive 24/7 resource for them, where there's advising resources, there's campus resources, and then I also use it as a way to do weekly announcements to them. It'll actually go out today at 1:30 about things that are going on campus, or if I'm doing a lot of drop-in advising on Zoom this current summer semester, just because there aren't as many students on campus, and so they aren't really scheduling appointments, but they're emailing me frantic at like 2:30. Hey, can I see you? Yes, you can, tomorrow at this time to this time. And so that's kind of what led to my involvement with the flipped advising piece with Dr. Steele. Is, he did that article, and then previously I had done a NACADA technology and advising webinar, and that's how we got connected originally. And so it was pretty interesting to just kind of get into this role, and I basically wear a lot of different hats, like you said. A couple of other hats I wear is that faculty advisor piece, which has been really fun. I really love the organization, and then I also do stuff with our on-campus council, so that's been a lot of fun too.
Yeah, and then so with the flipped advising, at what point were you able to decide like what went into like the LMS or the flipped advising that you were doing, and how has that been since you've been implementing that? Have the students noticed anything different when they're meeting with you? Have you and the other advisors noticed anything different when you're meeting with the students?
Yeah. So I kind of inherited it immediately when I started. So yay, congratulations, welcome, learn this. And so that was a lot of fun. To a certain extent, to me, I'm always been an early adopter when it comes to technology. And so just doing that to me is not a bad thing. Some people need a lot more training, but I was able to, they give me a lot of autonomy in my role to kind of manage it how I see fit. And so I was the one who implemented doing those weekly announcements, because students were telling me, well, I didn't know about this event. And I'm like, you got an email about it, but they don't read their emails. And so, but this way it's another, like, it, because, in the announcement section, it actually pops up on their Canvas page. So it's like, it's actually something else they can see. And then for some students, they'll have send straight to their email, that kind of thing. And then we also started utilizing the Canvas calendar. So it pops up in their to-do list. So if there's a drop-in advising or something like that, it's another way to just kind of put that out there so that they actually get it. And then we don't have to continually manage a listserv, because basically everybody that changes to our major, they get automatically added to it because of the coding and stuff in the system. And then I really started doing like video announcements. That was so awkward at first, but it got better. And so I was able to like utilize that, and I kept trying to keep it to like 3 minutes or less of just things that were happening. And then when we were pivoting to the online learning experience, even more so with COVID, we were getting a lot of questions, like a lot of the same questions, like pass fail and what is it? Why should I do it? And so creating videos that explain that, because, the policies are written online, but the students, for some reason, the comprehension isn't always as well done as it should be between like the students reading something and understanding it. So trying to merge the two is really important. And I think that's what the flipped advising is that we say in orientation, you have this great resource called, Canvas, or you have this great resource called, we call it GPS, but it's really just DegreeWorks, but explaining that from taking that one step further and making it to where they always have this resource. And then for us, we have an internship at the end of our major that they have to do, and they have to do very specific steps. And so we needed a place to house those steps into their experience that wasn't necessarily graded, but they're it's part of that experience for them. And so we use it for that as well. But it's really just like, it's kind of like for lack of a better term, like a frequently asked questions place. It's a place for them to just literally be able to ask that question, like, oh, there's a student center. Instead of me emailing Miss Mars like 5 different times about the same question, let me just go check and see if it's there. And usually it is. So that's kind of what we've really done. And then I've just kind of utilized it. And the way that we kind of see the effectiveness is based on how many questions we're getting about the same topic. And then we kind of like realize, okay, well, we need to put something there that is for them to, and that way, whenever they email us, we can say, go look at the student center. And that itself has just been a training piece on myself of not just answering the student question, but actually referring them back to the place that is a free resource for them.
And I suppose in relation to flipped advising, we had Doctors Steele and Villavicencio on episode 24 of Adventures in Advising, Flipping the Script. And I know you are...
I actually just listened to that one.
refreshing memory. But you are going to be presenting at the annual conference in October. Do you want to whet the listeners' appetites a little bit in relation to what you'll be presenting on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had, and I will unashamedly say this was my idea because it was. So I had this idea we had the article that came out last year, and it has 5 interviews with different people of different areas and stuff. And then we did the webinar. I want to say it was this year. I feel like I blacked out a little bit about some of this year, but earlier we did the webinar after that article. So what I had the idea was, why don't we continue basically what the webinar was, but have a little bit of a twist to it in a live panel event. So a live panel presentation where it's me and the other people that were on the previous conversations, and George is going to be Dr. Steele is going to be, what's the word, mediating, being the panel mediator. And so it'll give the opportunity for people to ask questions that maybe if they missed the webinar, or maybe they had questions since the webinar, they could, continue the conversation essentially about flipped advising, because it really is a flipped advising thing. But there's also going to be new pieces where we talk about, how do we know it's working? This question has been asked of me a lot lately, is how do we know we're good at what we do? And how do we know that this is happening? And so talking about those aspects of, well, we noticed less questions. And if we're asked, how do we quantify those things? That's important too. So we're working on the quantifiable aspect in my role. So that's something I finally have time to actually address and look at, like that kind of thing. Because one of the neat things in the LMS is you can actually see where people go in your course. And I love that piece. So you can actually like, oh, well, 3 people went on this day to this day, like that kind of thing, went to this particular page. And so that's really what that's really about, is the panel is going to be a continuation of the conversation and a way for us to also talk about the quantifiable aspects of using a flipped advising approach of, you have so many students you have to manage day to day. Well, one way you can lessen that management piece is by creating an online student center, at least in my case, for where they can reference questions that they might have. Or I know for the gentlemen that are from Florida, they were using it as a really key component of their freshman experience and orientation. And so that's another aspect. And then yet again, there's another lady from the graduate school. I want to say it's in Portland. I don't remember the name of it, but she talks about her online students that she manages through the graduate program. And then we have someone from Hawaii who talks about her experience using that too. So there's a lot of really diverse perspectives. I'm probably one of the only ones that uses it as a student center, whereas the other ones use it as more of a course. And so it's interesting because you get to hear why people do it that way and what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And so, yes, please come. We would love to have you. And it is going to be available virtually as well as in person. So, because we're actually going to have some of our presenters Zoom in to the panel, so it's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun and utilizing technology, and it's nice to have the different perspectives. So, if anyone who's any attendee, whether they're watching virtually or are there in person, they can probably pick a little bit up from everybody that's going to be speaking. So that sounds really fascinating. Now, one of the things too is, you're very passionate about career readiness for your students, and you have an active partnership with the UAB Career Center, with the faculty. Can you talk more about your partnerships with the faculty and the Career Center, and I guess in a way how you're able to work with and expose students to career opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. So with the faculty, I'll address that first. So we have, our degree is very, and this is probably going to be very degree specific. So if it doesn't work for your degree, don't feel bad. But for our degree, we have a very practitioner based field. So, and not just necessarily like healthcare, like, doctors, lawyers that aren't, not lawyers. I don't know why I said lawyers there, doctors and like nurses and stuff. But our program is based on healthcare administration. And so there's a lot of ways that can really pan out in your career. You could work in long-term care, which is like elderly care. You could also work as a hospital administrator, or you could work as just your regular office manager. Like there's a lot of ways it could really work. And so I kept getting the question, what can I do with this degree? And at the time I was relatively new, so I didn't honestly know. I was still learning all of the research and stuff and the information from our accrediting body, which is called AUPHA. And I won't go into the long name as long. It's just last part is important, healthcare administration. And so that's really what I was coming into this role with the expectation I would plan these visits with these faculty members, but it became to where we were literally doing the same type of site visit. So I started to go outside of just the faculty, but also to working with the Career Center to help plan some of those. I rebranded them last year, right before the pandemic. They're called employer tours now. And so basically they're helping, our students see I could work at a place like the Veterans Administration, or work at a place like Children's Hospital, which is like 2 blocks from my building. And so helping them see that there's not just this one set pathway, because that's one of my marketing tools for our degree, is that it is very versatile and that it's the business side of healthcare. And so trying to help them see that in actuality is where those faculty partnerships come in. And then on the other side of it is that our program is very, I don't want to say prescriptive, because they can take the classes at any level, but they do have to take very specific classes for the major. And so if a student's not doing well in a class and they don't make the grade they need to, that could hold up their progression. And so the faculty and I, especially in the last year or so, have really become partners in student success, and that they let me know when a student isn't doing so great, so I can make sure they know about the add drop deadline or the withdrawal deadline, so that or the pass fail in that instance. Because our program has a specific grade requirement. And so those are kind of the faculty partnerships I've had. On the other side with the Career Center, I'm sure a lot of career centers are like this, but they have certain benchmarks they have to meet with the partnerships or the schools that they work with. Because at our model, each of our schools have a career consultant, and so they have to do events and stuff like that. And so what I started doing before the pandemic was the career consultant and I would host office hours in the building just for the School of Health Professions. And I kind of became the unofficial career consultant contact. And so I would help her get connected to students, and not just ours, but like all over the school. And then we, through that partnership, I got connected to the employer recruiters, essentially. So they basically, they make those relationships with those employers to get them to come to campus and recruit our students. And so we started doing that together. And so it was like the day, I still remember, it was the day the university sent out the email that they were monitoring the pandemic. It was like February 22nd or something. I still remember this day. We had an employer panel, which was awesome. We had about 10 employers come to our building, and we had lunch with about 30 or so students that could make it. And they got to really have that hands-on networking capability, because what we were finding is that our students were they weren't networking the way that they could. And so we were trying to make it easier on them. Not that we would, find a job for them, but we would make it as easy as possible to find a job. And then even within the last 2 semesters, we have our internship process, like I mentioned. And so a lot of times our students will find jobs through that process. And so it's a lot of I guess the easiest way to put it is a lot of networking, a lot of relationship building. I think sometimes people in the academic side of things are really afraid to partner with the student affairs side of things. And so, and I'm not, because I came from that. So I'm like, I could see the relationship between that. And I think it's so important to have, because we want our students to be well-rounded, right? So why wouldn't we partner together? And then for us in our program specifically, we have a human resources course. And so they already have to create a LinkedIn. They have to create, they have to have a headshot for that. And so one of the other really unique perks of our career center is they do headshot days. So they actually, you can actually go get a professional portrait headshot, whatever you want to call it, in their student center. But I wanted to bring them to us because our students just don't go to that part of campus, because UAB as a whole, when I started, it was like spread out over 90 blocks. And I think now it's like at 120 blocks. Like, we're a huge campus, and it's very confusing if you don't know where to go. And so trying to, professionalize our students is really what drives my partnerships. Is I want to make it as easy as possible. So I don't mind doing more work to make sure that they're served well, and because I want them to get hired. I don't want them to come back to me in like 2 months and say, I can't find a job. And to be fair, like, I can give them all the resources, and if they don't actually take the initiative, that's on them. But the thing is, I'm going to make sure I've done as much as possible to make it available. And then, like, one of the other really unique things that they have done as a career center is they actually now have a Canvas course shell that you can add, or a module section that you can add into your Canvas courses. And so there's talk about doing that for sure. But I mean, I'm very passionate about it because I didn't have anybody that advocated for me like that. Like, my advisor, no offense to, I'm not going to say his name. He actually might be retired, so it probably wouldn't matter. But my advisor at Auburn was not this way. Like, he did not actively advocate for me and help me find ways. I think it was honestly like, I'm a Christian, so the Lord, like, that was how I found some of my opportunities and stuff, like the graduate school fair, and stuff like that. That was a really big thing. And then RA, I just found because I was able to, I loved working in the residence halls. I was part of the RHA, the Residence Hall Association, and stuff. And so I think that was really a big part of my my growth. But I want someone to advocate for me like I wish I would have been advocated for. And I think that's a key component in advisors, is that, yeah, there's people that are in the advising field that they're here to do a job. That's fine. That's your choice. But I really believe our lives are much richer as advisors when we actually take an active part in helping them succeed. And so, because I mean, a lot of advising and success, those two words often go together when you're looking at advising centers. And so part of that success is not just, let's get you through this degree. It's getting you to your next step, which is working full time, making a name for yourself, making a personal brand. And that's another part, is people don't realize that even as a student, you can have a personal brand. And so we have to, at the career readiness aspect, we have to say, well, is your personal brand good? And they're like, what does that mean? And that's just, do people know your name, and what do they associate with that name? And so, like, for me, Rachel Mars, I want people to associate not just good advisor, but great advisor, great advocate. And that's something that I really take to heart, because you only have one name. Well, depends on who you ask. But some people, they change their name. But you know what I mean? So, like, you have one reputation that you have to really build. And so when we're going through our internship process, I try to help our students realize that, every day you go to that internship is a job interview. Like, you're interviewing every single day, and everything you do is going to account for whether or not they decide to offer you a position or not. So make it count, make it a good one. So, but I mean, I think that's where my passion comes from, is because I am a first generation student. And so I want someone to be what I needed. And that's kind of where it all comes down to for me.
Well, I love the passion. I love the philosophy. I love your willingness to collaborate across the university. And I definitely think there will be things that listeners can take away from, that piece that you've talked about, and particularly in relation to, ensuring students are career ready. One of the things that I think would be interesting to chat about, because we're recording this in late June, and next month is NACADA's Summer Institute. And that's something you took part on and have written about previously. Maybe you could share with listeners a little bit about your experience with the Summer Institute.
Absolutely. So I did the Summer Institute in 2017, so prior to COVID wrecking everybody's lives. Not really, but wrecking everybody's plans, not really lives. I feel like that's a better description. And it was, I was at Stanford at the time. And so I remember asking my supervisor to go, because I kept getting feedback, and take this for what you will, that the national conference was in the middle of peak advising season. And so that was a problem. So I was trying to solve a problem. I didn't really know exactly. I just knew I read about the Institute and I thought it was really awesome. And I was like, I know, because one of the things we were doing I was doing in that role is that we had a discussion about, or not discussion, I guess, in the advising appointments, every student had to sign an agreement that said, I will make this grade and do this and da, da, da. And basically they had to sign it very old school, like type of way. And so they were having to sign this document anyway. So I was like, why can't we incorporate that into an advising syllabus? Because I had been reading articles at the time about using that as an effective way to communicate expectations, not just for the years that I was advising them, but our upperclassmen advisor was, she was running into issues where students were saying certain things to her that were just not appropriate, and having unrealistic expectations. Because sometimes when you work at a private college, students, because they pay more, they expect more, and that's not necessarily bad, but there's also, there's reality that has to come into that aspect. And so I definitely did the Institute. It was honestly one of the best experiences of my professional life, and I'm not just saying that to make you pay money and go. It really was. It was a week long, and I think it's virtual this year. I'm hope that eventually they'll go back to in person, because I think the act of literally getting away from where you work and going and just intentionally working out your plan, because the way it works is the first day you kind of meet your group. You're grouped into similar sized institutions, or similar backgrounds. So like all of the people in my group were from a small private faith-based college. And so it was really a really interesting just experience. And all of us had our own goals. And then we had these great like leaders who were some of the in Christianity, they talk about greats in the faith. I call these greats in advising. Like we had just some really great mentors and stuff. And I am blanking on his name. His first name is Richard. He does a lot of stuff with assessment. I'm blanking on his last name. But he was mine, and he was wonderful. I'm so grateful I was part of his group, because he really made me think about the why behind I wanted to do the syllabus. And so that was just really, really impactful. And so literally it was like you go through these sessions during the day. Some of them are fundamental Nakata values, advising values. Like we went through the different approaches, the different theories. And it was just it was like an intensive, not only for my goals, but also for just learning about Nakata and the advising profession, which was just so, I might cry thinking about it, because it was just so good. And I'm such a big nerd. It was just wonderful. I got to nerd out with all my friends. And so it was great. And I left the Institute, because it was in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was wonderful escaping the Alabama heat in July, let me tell you. And so going to the Wisconsin and stuff was just an adventure in and of itself. And then I actually got to meet a lot of the people that were at the Institute were from the Wisconsin area. And so it was hilarious, because we would tell each other, you have an accent, and they were like, you have an accent. I was like, no, you do. And so like, because I'm Southern and they're Wisconsin. And so and so all the different aspects were really fun to kind of just, the relationships that you built out of that experience were really great. And we still have a relationship. I still have a Facebook group, like messenger group, that we all message each other just occasionally and stuff. And so, and like we had an advisor from Canada in our group, which was so cool. And then an advisor from Las Vegas. And so just, all these different just aspects that you can really merge together. And then the awesome thing is that there's a scholarship that you can apply for to it. That was honestly probably the main reason I got to go, was because I had earned the Wesley Abley scholarship, and I was very excited, because I was like, yeah, no, it's one of the things they had to pay for, because that was always the big question: who's going to pay for this? And I was like, not me. And so it was a lot of fun for just building relationships, but also walking away with I felt so accomplished at the end of that week. Like you get out of it what you put into it. Like you can go and not do the work, and that's on you, but you will have to present your action plan at the end of the week. And so I say, go into it with the expectation to work, but also there's fun and stuff like that. And, and if you're doing it from home this year, I would say make sure you don't make a plan to have to cook that week, because you're going to be doing homework at night. And so you want to make sure you have the time to do it, and stuff like that. But I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I said that if I had done that prior to going to a conference, I probably wouldn't have gone to a conference, but I mean, I love the conferences for a whole different reason, just the networking that happens there and the relationships that are built, but just that intensive experience. If you can do it with a team, it's even better. I was solo, so that was interesting. So that's probably why my extrovert was like, I need friends, be my friend. And, I have this moniker within my friend group that I'm aggressively friendly, which is very true. You're going to be my friend. Sorry. So that's just, that's kind of how it works out. But I really love the Institute. And I forgot I wrote about that. No, see, I forgot. So a really big piece of that. And then that also opens, I think, relationships into NACADA. That's how I got really more involved in NACADA, was doing the Institute. Because I mean, all of the NACADA leadership is usually at those institutes, and they're so wonderful. Like I've never been in a place where they're so supportive, and they really want you to succeed. They don't have, at least, I mean, not that I know of, they don't have any ill will towards you, from what I can tell. And that's hard to find sometimes professionally, especially if you come from an institution where that isn't always the culture.
Yeah, and it's, 'cause also you can go to a conference and just get overwhelmed with everything. So to have things like this, like the Institute, where it's like, let's work on one thing and let's make it the best thing ever. Because I did have a previous colleague, who went a few years ago. I think it was probably 2015 or 2016 for the Institute, and by the end of that week, she was able to revamp the undeclared and undecided exploratory advising process that she was coordinating. And it was probably one of the most amazing things. And then she ended up getting to then present about the results once she implemented it at our university. So it was really fantastic. Now, one of the things with your advising philosophy is it revolves around a couple of advising theories, like appreciative advising, developmental advising. How has your advising philosophy evolved over the years to where the appreciative advising and developmental advising stand out to you?
That's a very good question. I would probably say that I didn't really have a true defined theory until the last 2 years. And that's just because I was so new. Like I didn't really understand. I didn't understand, and I did, to be honest, didn't really care what anybody thought about my advising. I knew I was awesome. But as you go through, you mature. And so, and I was so new. When I came, I feel like one of the things I can say here without hopefully throwing anybody under the bus is that my previous position, I was the originator of the role, but there was a lot of things that I was not allowed to do in that role because it wasn't my job. And I feel like as I've gotten into this role, I'll be here for 3 years in August, I've really been allowed to develop. And like you get the patterns down, you get the things down that you need to know, and the curriculum and stuff, but sometimes I think advisors need time to develop their own thought processes. And I think sometimes that's not always the viewpoint of the university, that they just want you to do the job. But that's not the case. I think that if we want to create professional advisors, we have to give them time to think about what they really want. And for me, the development piece is really about, I want the students to want to do their work, and not that I want them to do, the coursework, but I want them to want to do the field that they're going into. And so giving them time to explore and really think about, I don't want to take this many classes. Go beyond that. Like, why do I want to do healthcare management? Like, what's the why? And then how is this going to fit into my goals? I think that's really part of the developmental piece. And then the appreciative piece is really, I view advisors as partners, and I feel like appreciative advising is much more centered on the partnership versus prescriptive, where it's like, do this and you'll succeed, like or do this class because it's offered here. And like our program can tend towards prescriptive because we have certain classes that are offered certain places, but I really want them to self-identify and then help them figure out why they want to do it. And that's kind of where those really come into. I'm still developing my advising philosophy theory. So to be honest, just because I really didn't have to put anything on paper until this last year when I got nominated for the Advisor of the Year award at our school. And so part of that is you have to write an advising philosophy. And I was like, oh man, I got to think about this. And I did it really fast. And so those were like the two that stuck out to me when I was reviewing it and everything. But yeah, I mean, for me, I've always been very holistic when it comes to the student, because my thought is if you're not having your natural needs met, you can't meet your academic needs. So you don't have food, shelter, a secure friendship, secure relationship that you can depend upon. That's important. And I feel like a lot of times what I do is I provide that security that I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to be here no matter what. And honestly, you can't do that without time. Like, relationship building only happens over time. Some people are much more open to the advising relationship than others, and you have to be okay with that too, because they may view as a prescriptive resource versus the students who want you to be developmental. And I'm open to switching my approaches when it comes to students to a certain degree, but just trying to be flexible is really a big part of why I probably identify most with those, because I feel like those are the most flexible approaches, theories, whatever you want to say.
And I suppose, Rachel, maybe building off that a little bit, and probably one of our last big questions then would be in terms of, I think, an area of interest, certainly that jumps out, at least from, seeing you online, would be your interest in kind of educational leadership. And I know you're going back to school again in the fall, or the autumn, as we say here. But like, can you talk to me, I suppose, a little bit about like that, where that interest, kind of where that came from, and the desire to further your studies in the area?
Absolutely. So the lead certificate that I'm going back for, I found that out on Saturday morning. It was great. I was like, great start to the weekend. I really, I want to be a leader. Like, and I feel like I can be a leader where I am. I believe you can. There's a whole like book out there called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. I think that's great, but I think that if you can marry your education to the leadership that you want to possess, that's important. And so that's part of where my goals are. I eventually would love to be a director of advising. I believe that could change. Who knows? I don't really. I think the research aspect is so important too. That's not my passion, but I will do it if I need to. So I think it's just really interesting following the patterns of advising, and how because you can identify when a student has been successfully advised, and you can also identify characteristics. Now, not everybody has to be a bubbly, extroverted advisor. That's not what I'm saying, because that's not everybody's approach. But I do think that for me, I want to educate myself so I can be the best leader and supervisor when I get to those roles. And then also by leading myself, I can lead others. Does that make sense? So I think that part of that is education. And like this lead certificate, the first class I have is about professional leadership and what that looks like, what those are. And then the other class I'm taking this fall is going to be on advising and history. And so I'm really excited about that. My boss today, she's like, you better make an A in that. And I was like, I will, don't worry. And so I'm really excited about that, because for the certificate, there's 4 classes you have to take, and there's one about ethics, there's one about assessment, and then I've got to go look at the other one. I think there's leadership styles is another one, and then you get to choose 2 electives. And so one of my electives is going to be the Lead 570, which is about advising. And so it's a really great certificate because it is only 15 credits. And I felt like a master's degree. I already have a master's degree in higher educational leadership, and the piece that's really missing is going to be that specific how to be a leader. And that's what I want, is the how to be a leader, and how to be a supervisor. My deep desire, I think, beyond just being a director of advising, is not necessarily so I can be in charge, but so I can mentor. That's like my heart and my passion, because in my personal life, I lead a lot of small groups, and I've been really given the opportunity to mentor young women who are fresh in their marriages, because our marriage is awesome now, but it went through some seasons at the beginning that were tough, because when you're adjusting to living together, it's a whole other thing, or adjusting being committed to someone else. And so just like we have adjustments when we come into a new job, like why wouldn't you want to have someone that can mentor you through that new job? And it's been kind of cool. This the last month we hired a new advisor, and so I really got to see that piece on that side of things, being a true trainer, because I was training myself, but I had never really trained another professional in advising. And so that was really exciting to be able to be part of that experience and lead that. And then we're potentially going through some transitions in my job right now with our like structure in our school, the current school I'm in. And so we're going to have some interesting, it's going to be interesting too. So that there'll probably be some more training pieces to be part of for that. So I'm excited about that. And I just really, I think, honestly, Colin, to answer your question just most directly, is I want to mentor people. That's really what I really want to do. And I really want to be that constant source. And it's kind of what advisors do for students. I want to do that for other advising professionals, like be that constant source of steadiness, and also like information. And also, like, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to find it out. And if I can't find it out, we'll figure it out, like that kind of thing. Because sometimes, in higher education, there isn't a problem until it's brought to you the first time, and you're like, well, we got to figure this out, so let's do it together. And I recently wrote just kind of, I like to write on the side. That's how I process. And so I was writing out like a question, like I was doing a pro con list for something, and it was like, why do I want to do this program? And it was actually about the LEAD program. And one of the things I wrote in that was, I want to be the partner with my advisors under me to mentor them so that they can lead themselves while they lead their students. And that's kind of where it all goes into the same thing. It's all about leadership, because I think in higher education, we're going to see a large leadership shakeup in the next 10 years. And I think the pandemic, we're already seeing that with people retiring and, or moving out of higher education completely. I read an article one time that said that mid-level managers are the most likely to leave. And so in higher education, not just advising, but they're the most burnout sector of higher education. And it's just because there's not really anywhere to go sometimes. And then sometimes they're just not mentored themselves. And so, helping, I think you have to mentor yourself sometimes, because even if you don't have it above you, because you just have to find and seek out ways to, make yourself better.
Yeah, great advice. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes happening. So could be some great opportunities,
Agreed.
also some challenges. But if listeners have any questions,
Yes.
How can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me just via email, or if they want to follow my Instagram, Aldi Foodie, that's fine. No, I'm just kidding. But if I would say professional advice, let's do rmars@uab.edu.
Sounds good. And I just remember when we first met at the Atlanta NACADA annual conference, and we were just two advisors that were just trying to navigate getting around a conference. And I'm glad that we got to meet and keep in touch and look at how things have progressed. And I'm really happy to see where you're at today and how much you've been accomplishing and how much you have that you're going to be doing. And I look forward to hopefully catching your conference in Cincinnati. But Rachel, thank you for joining us today.
Of course, no problem. It was great to meet you. Yeah, I remember when we met, I met you and Star at the conference, and we were talking about social media, and I got shot down, but that's okay. But, I'm in a different place now. It's all good. So I'm very grateful. And I'm so glad I got to meet you, see you, Colum, in person. I know that I met you at the conference, the last one we all went to, which was in Louisville. Yeah, Louisville. And so, yeah, that's really exciting. I'm so grateful for this network. I just love it. And I love your podcast. It's something that really encourages me a lot of times.